Hi, I am Mary Jo Foley, Community Magnet for Petri.com. I'm here with Brad Sams, Executive Editor of Petri.com, and our special guest, CVP of Microsoft Office 365, Jeff Teper. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Thanks. Great to see you, Brad, too.
Likewise. I think this is going to be a good time. You had an excellent keynote, almost right on the other side of this wall. Mm-hmm. And Mary Jo, and we got some questions for you. I know you're in and out, but we appreciate your time stopping by.
I am glad to do it. Fire away.
Great. Well, I think you had a question you were dying to ask, so you should go first.
Yeah, so my generation is known as the millennials, and you were talking about the millennial workforce and how, we're going to be taking over control of everything, actually, during your keynote. And I'm curious to get your perspective on the upcoming generation who is moving now more into the management level, mid-level roles in companies, and how Microsoft and you all see that transition occurring in the digital workforce.
Yeah, it's, I think you always got to be careful to not overgeneralize a generation too much, but it is certainly true that millennials have come in having grown up on technology. It was pervasive in their childhood. They take it for granted. And when they see a process, a culture, transparency that doesn't meet their expectations, they're understandably, and I think generally in a healthy way, demanding of change. And we do see, and we have the privilege of working with lots of organizations, and it's sometimes interesting when you see some of those enter mid-level management in IT and the speed of decision making accelerates because they are demanding about some of these technologies and the culture changes that go with them.
Interesting. I'm curious if you see one of the challenges that we hear often, for example, Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
The newer generation typically adopts very quickly, and then you have the older generations kind of lag. Do you see that as well, or do you see, what do you see on your side of the equation?
Think one phrase we've been using a lot is this multi-generational workforce, where in a lot of organizations you have 3 and sometimes 4 generations of employees. And I do think it is perhaps a bit unfair to characterize the people who are older to be technology averse.
That is
many of them are like the earliest of adopters and equally as demanding as the millennials. And so it doesn't 100% correlate on age, but it's certainly true that if you bring something in like Teams and say, hey, let's shift our conversations from email to real-time chat. We'll make decisions in minutes as opposed to days. We will have a record of that doesn't flood everybody's inbox. You can go back and find the persistent chat if you want it in some channel. If you don't need it, you're not overwhelmed with it. And again, if you've grown up as a kid where chat was your only mechanism for communication, we all have gone through the thing where we talk to somebody and said, let me give you your email, and you get a quizzical look and say, no, we communicate via chat. And so people who grew up with that do expect it and do spot the efficiencies over email for ad hoc workgroup communication. And so, we certainly try to help learn from those sort of multi-generational workforces and share best practices.
The one interesting thing, which ties in perfectly to ShiftHappens and AvePoint, is this whole relationship actually got started through Twitter DMs. Dux and I communicate almost exclusively through Twitter DMs, and it was a couple years ago I reached out to him that way, and to this day we don't email each other. It's Twitter DMs is everything.
That's how I got prepped for this event too, was through Twitter DMs with Dux as well.
You brought up in your keynote too the example of stream video.
Yeah.
How some people who are younger typically will just expect that you're going to publish a trip report in the form of a video instead of 2 pages Word document. So I think that's also an interesting example of how the expectations have changed.
Yeah. Chat and video are probably the 2 big ones where, again, a generation has grown up with them as the primary means of, not the primary, but a pretty dominant means of digesting information. And when we see groups, each of the teams in my group does some form of monthly business review. Not the most novel of ways to run a business, but it's essential. You look at your metrics and your customer insights and look at your roadmap. And the Excel team did something a few months ago that was pretty neat, where for each of their 10 investment areas, AI and collaboration and mobile, they had the person on point in the team record just a little short video, and we put it on stream. And people are loving it. It's more engaging. It's more entertaining. They tell a joke. They show passion and customer empathy. And now the monthly business updates that are just written down are a little dry by comparison. So every month I'm looking forward to this Excel set of videos, and I go in and watch them on my phone. So
nice. If you want to leak any of those to us, we would love to publish them for you.
Mary Jo going right for the heart.
Yes.
Not even easing into it.
people in the Excel team, do not send Mary Jo those videos.
Send them to
do
Brad.
not.
That is Brad at
So another thing I wanted to touch on that you brought up in the keynote it was the idea of how inside Microsoft you've changed the way you collaborate on products. And you talked about how there is actually a design team where you're involved with, I believe, Joe Belfiore.
Yep.
And
Interesting.
that you are working together on product design. Could you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah.
And also how that changes the products you're building and what we're seeing?
Yeah. Historically, our designers had been pretty collaborative. And if there was some major sweeping thing that was cutting across Microsoft, you might remember what was originally the Metro design language became MDL. And
Right.
People would work together on it. But it was, they weren't, it wasn't constantly cross-team. You would often agree on some plans, go divide, build it, and come back, and then you'd see a new version of Word on a new version of Windows and say, well, like that wasn't really what. And so we've done I mentioned in the keynote that V team that we've created here. We call it the OXC, the Open Experience Collective, and they have a repository where they share all their work. We get together people in buildings. We won't tell you where because we don't want you peeking through the glass. And they prototype these things from the get-go. And I'll give one example of a place where we've done good but not great work, but I think we've got great work coming, which is the Office apps sitting inside Teams. That if you look at it today, the integration's pretty good. It's better than the competing alternatives and so forth. But there's this nesting of menus and commanding that, after the fact, you realize, well, there's the Teams layer, then there's the ribbon, and of course, if you're looking in the browser, there's browser Chrome. And so we have a V team for people from Office and Windows and even Surface prototyping those things and how do we get rid, just as one thing, how do we get rid of the menu stacking and also use AI for commanding to show up when it should as opposed to being in your face? And we've, you mentioned these meetings, Brian McDonald who runs Teams and Joe Belfiore who runs Windows and Edge and the Surface, Panos from Surface. We get together and Panos is building actually because ultimately you open up a Surface and it all should just work. And we look at the work together. So I'm not revealing anything. Last week we spent some time on Ink and how Ink should work in Windows and Office and Surface. And we're pretty, it's more fun to work this way, and I think people are going to get better products as a result.
Well, that's a good end goal, right? Everybody wants to be more productive with less input, and that's a notable achievement. And it's nice that, especially from several years ago, being so open about how Microsoft is now working across the silos, because as we all know, many, many years ago, those silos were real rigid, but you can really see that collaboration internally starting to materialize in the products you guys are shipping. Yeah,
I think one thing people didn't realize is there was definitely periods of siloing, more siloing in the company, but perhaps more than sort of anything like that, it was just shifting from, I talked about waterfall to agile. When the cloud and mobile came and Teams could ship all the time, it was pretty liberating. And there wasn't like this territorialism, hey, I don't want to work with you. It was just like, hey, I can ship on my own schedule when it's ready, go, go, go. And we had a period for a few years where we traded off, in the interest of getting velocity and speed in Microsoft, we picked up a little cacophony, not because people were being territorial, but because they hadn't replaced the old ways we had for doing cross-company plans with anything new. And so now we're agile, but we have, I mentioned these things like these coherence streams. So,
Yeah.
so every month we look at things like, how does identity work? How does search work? And so we look identity. We meet with Scott Guthrie's Azure team, and what's the sign-on look like? How do you switch between users? You know, one of Scott and Rajesh's favorite things is, like, I have multiple accounts with Microsoft 365 and Azure. How I flip between those accounts should work the same in our products.
Yep.
And so we meet on that. Different things ship as soon as the teams are ready. We don't hold everybody back for the thing that's going to take the longest. So I'm pretty excited that it is a more collaborative culture. Satya has really, really pushed that and asked us all as leaders to drive it. But I think it's just also these new hybrid structures that help us be fast and coherent.
I also liked how you talked about in the old days when people thought of Office, they thought of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and now you and they think more about experiences, right? What does experiences mean when you say it that way? Could you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so I'll give you one example, and I'll mention the products just so you can
Okay.
see a little bit of the complexity, but then the focus on the scenario. So one of the things we've showed that people are excited about is automating workflows in the communications tools. And as I briefly mentioned in the keynote, we have a SharePoint list. Embedded is Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow may call 10 steps, including Azure Cognitive Services to do some processing. All that SharePoint list is contained in a Microsoft Teams tab associated with a channel. And so if you emphasize the product, you say, woohoo, I did cognitive services in a flow, in a SharePoint list, in Teams. And if you focus on the Russian doll, it's all very geeky. But no, you know, it's only like that because we're talking about the products.
Right.
If you talk about the experience and you say, hey, we want to improve some workflows in the context of collaborative activities and just focus on that, let's just go build that experience. And so I think perhaps it's not just what we build, but it's how we talk about it. When we
Right.
talk about these things, we used to celebrate our individual
Yeah.
parts of Microsoft a little bit more than we
true.
should have.
It made it fun, though.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like this year, I'm risking saying it's like year of desktop Linux, but it's the year of Power Apps, isn't it?
is.
Yeah.
I feel like Power
well,
Platform.
I gave the answer to the question during the keynote with Dux about I came to Microsoft and the first thing I got to do was evangelize
Right.
Visual Basic. And then if you think about what we did with SharePoint,
Sure.
it's that idea of how do you help somebody else make something really, really quickly? How do you do like the first 90% and then let them do the last 10% and let them be a hero for what their company needs?
Sure.
And so Power Apps is very much in that spirit of building a solution as quickly as humanly possible, connecting to whatever you can. And so when I came back to the SharePoint team after the strategy role, I met with James Phillips, who runs the business application group, and said, hey, James, I want to, and Power Apps hadn't shipped yet. It was a secret. I don't think you'd.
I don't think I did.
I don't think you had it. And I said, James, I want to not just integrate with Power Apps and Flow. I want to embed it in SharePoint. And I don't want to have our own forms design environment. I think the world will be a simpler place if we say, go build a mobile app, go build a web experience, and you use Power Apps. They deliberately picked the name for people who would make that mistake. A huge percentage, the number one data source for Power Apps is SharePoint lists.
Oh, wow.
Because this magic of this tool that helps people build things rapidly found the community of passionate makers. There's no one more wonderful maker community in Microsoft than people who work on SharePoint. And so people are building these Power Apps, whether they connect to Dynamics or Teams or the Microsoft Graph or SharePoint or SAP, Salesforce. Part of its success is it's an open platform. It's not just a SharePoint thing.
Yeah, and then was it last week you guys announced all the AI integrations that are coming to the entire Power platform?
Yep.
Can you talk about that a little bit? How do you envision that materializing? Because AI gets thrown around a lot, and then Microsoft is drizzling it all over everything they do. But how does it materialize in the Power platform?
Yeah, I think if you think about work getting done, there's going to be three inputs. One is how do we, mostly in the Office team, think about how we help human beings work together more efficiently. Second is when there's human work that is repeatable, you can automate through logic. Power Apps and Flow can say, you 6 people ad hoc did this through 10 emails or Teams chats.
Yeah.
Why don't we structure that a little bit so we can track it more formally? We'll be able to graph completion rate and time in the queue and so forth. And so Flow is about automating human workflows in a well understood way. But then you want to go one step further, which is what about these things that you can't really express in logic, that there is more of a model for it that is derived from lots of signals, and you may not even be able to explain why the Power AI technology is recommending whether a loan should be approved or not. It's not some simple formula that you could express in Flow of, if you're trying to buy the house that is 10 times your income, you should be turned down. There's more factors involved there's ML models that look at default rates and so forth. And so I think it's great. There's a buzzword in the industry. We used to call it business process management. It's now robotic process automation, which includes these sort of AI and ML technologies combined with traditional workflows. And we think combined with human beings collaborating, because we don't think the AI and the scripted logic, there's a lot of stuff that's going to require human judgment.
Right.
So I think it's all three, logic, AI, and human beings working in concert. And so that's why you see us in Microsoft 365 so much embracing the Power Platform.
Very, very interesting. The Power Platform is fascinating, mostly because what you said, 90% you guys do, you show up, do the 10%, you get all the reward.
Yeah, that's part of the fun at working at Microsoft. People grabbed me after the keynote who'd made their whole career in SharePoint. It was kind of fun. Is we get to make people heroes. We get to give people tools that they can do things that would amaze their colleagues, and they get the credit for it. And I would say that's probably the most satisfying part of my job.
It's a fun way, too. I was talking with some people, and they said, hey, I was a real Excel guru, and I got really good at the syntax. And it's like, well, I bet I can do this in other Microsoft products. Then they moved into Flow, and now they're moving fully into the Power Platform. And so the joke is that Excel is the gateway drug to the Power Platform because people get really good at the syntax and think programming is fun, and then just kind of move deeper into the stack of Microsoft.
Yeah, we have lots of great case studies on Power Apps where people did exactly that. There was one where it was an assistant principal in the Tacoma school system who part-time taught themselves this stuff, and then amazed the school, when they probably weren't able to get dedicated IT resources to build this app.
Yeah. It's a fascinating product, and everybody's journey into it starts somewhere else, but it's a neat thing. Got anything else?
No, I think we're set.
Oh, good. That was kind of
wasn't
easy
so
by
hard,
your guys'
was it?
standards.
Once the cameras turn off, that's when the real questions start. But to everybody else, thanks for tuning in. We'll have a lot more information, and we'll link down to Jeff's Twitter down in the description below. Mary Jo and Jeff, thanks for hanging out. Everybody else, hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you right back here next time.